Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this regular meeting of Council Tuesday, October 14th, 2025, 6 p.m. Council Chambers, Town of St. Mary's to order. I'll begin this evening by asking for declarations of pecuniary interest, starting with Councillor Edney.
I have none.
Councillor Lucas?
None.
Councillor Pridham?
None.
Councillor Alward?
None.
And I have none. The Council for the Town of St. Mary's acknowledges with gratitude and respect that we are gathering on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee people of the Longhouse, giving thanks for all creation. The agenda has been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or problems with the agenda? Seeing nothing, I'll seek a motion that the October 14th, 2025 regular council meeting agenda be accepted as presented. Someone going to move that motion. Moved by Councillor Alward, second by Councillor Edney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item number 4 is our public input period. Is there anyone in the gallery this evening that wishes to speak to anything on the agenda? Pardon me? Item 8.4, yes, we'll call you up for then, for sure. Was there anything received by the clerk's office this morning? Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the public meeting for 178 Thomas Street. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. The purpose of tonight's public meeting is to solicit the public's comments with respect to the application for zoning bylaw amendment for 178 Ontario Street by 239-8315 Ontario Limited, care of Scott McIntosh. Today's meeting is a mandatory public meeting held under the Planning Act. If you wish to be notified of the decision on this application, please contact the clerk, Jenna McCartney, at clerk's office at town.stmarys.on.ca. I'll now ask Ms. McCartney to advise how notice was given, please.
Thank you, Mayor Strathy. Notice was given by first class mail to the owners of all properties located within 120 meters or 400 feet of the subject lands, to those agencies as prescribed by regulation, and signage advertising tonight's meeting was posted on the subject lands. The following is a summary of agency comments received. Festival Hydro provided comments summarized as follows. Festival Hydro currently has no infrastructure along Park Lane. However, the proposed lot could be serviced off Ontario Street or Thomas Street pending Town of St. Mary's approvals. As the road allowance width for Ontario Street and Park Lane appear to be narrower than typical, there may be challenges bringing servicing to the lot for this reason. It does look like right-of-way widenings are depicted, which may assist. The applicant or any future purchasers of the lot should contact Festival Hydro Engineering directly to discuss servicing options and high-level costs. The Town of St. Mary's Public Works Department provided comments summarized as follows. No service modifications are required for the existing sanitary and water connections for the required lot. For the serviced lot, water, wastewater, and potentially stormwater services from Park Lane would be required. The Upper Thames River Conservation Authority has commented that it has no objections to the application and added that the lot to be created and developed is entirely outside of the regulated area and flood-free access from Park Lane is achieved under the existing conditions during a regulatory event known as the 250-year event. The town has also received public comments summarized as follows. From Amy Brennan at 223 Thomas Street. Improvements to current home is appreciated, but cramming another home is not fair to the existing surrounding homeowners. If backyard tree is removed, owners directly behind this lot on Ontario Street and beside it on Thomas Street will be looking directly into this proposed home. With the previous property owners, there are police presence, unkept grass, and landscaping, etc. Concerned with loss of green space on this lot and loss of tobogganing hill and the lovely view of the old school on lot to the north. Not against progress and new housing, but opposed to new factoring in the charm of a small town, larger lots, access to historical buildings, and on the overall feeling of community. Those are the end of the comments.
Okay, thank you. I'll now call upon Councillor Lucas to advise Council of the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment. Councillor Lucas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the September 15th, 2025 meeting, the Planning Advisory Committee endorsed the application in principle and recommended that council proceed with the statutory public meeting.
Thank you. I'll now call upon the town's planner, Mr. Mark Stone, to provide additional information regarding the proposed application. Mr. Stone, please.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and those in attendance. The town has received an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for 178 Thomas Street, and it relates to a consent to sever application. Sorry, a dog just busted into my office. Just give me 1 second here.
Doug.
Very sorry about that. Never happened before. There is an application related to this. It's a consent to sever application that's also been submitted by the owner. The property is bounded by Thomas Street and Park Lane, Thomas Street and Park Lane, and Ontario Street is located to the west-northwest. The subject property is about 981 square meters in size, and there's about 20 meters of frontage on Thomas and 49 meters of frontage along Park. The immediate area consists predominantly of single attached dwellings, but there's a low-rise apartment complex to the north. There's an existing single attached dwelling on the subject property located here. There's also an existing detached garage along Park, and there's an existing access and driveway also along Park. The owner is proposing to sever the property into 2 lots as shown on this plan. The retained portion is 618 square meters, and the severed portion would be just under 363 square meters. As I mentioned a minute ago, there is a associated consent to sever application, and that will be considered by the town's Committee of Adjustment in the future. And I should note that typically when you have a consent to sever application where you're creating 1 new lot, any zoning deficiencies are dealt with through an accompanying minor variance application that also goes to the Committee of Adjustment. But in this case, a zoning bylaw amendment application has been submitted mainly due to the proposed reduction to the minimum lot size, in particular of the proposed severed lot that's shown in red here. The applicant has indicated that they're proposing to move the existing garage, which is shown here, to the south side of the retained lot, and also move the existing driveway to the south side of the existing house. And then a single attached dwelling would be built on the proposed new westerly lot. The official plan, which I'll talk about in a minute, sets out planned road widths for all roads of the town. Park Lane is classified as local, while Thomas is arterial. And so where a road allowance doesn't meet the planned road widths, the town requires land to be conveyed along those frontages at the time of certain applications. And that could be in a case of a plan of subdivision, or like in this case, with a severance application. And so if this continues down the road and the consent application goes to the Committee of Adjustment, there would be recommended conditions that would include requirements for conveyance of land to the town, and that would be 3 meters along Thomas, and it's shown in shading here, and 2.5 meters along Park. The subject property, like most of the surrounding areas, designated residential, and a range of dwelling types are permitted, anywhere up from single attached to low-rise apartments. Some of the key objectives include providing new development through intensification that makes use of existing infrastructure like roads and sewers and so on. And the official plan also supports providing choice in housing in terms of quality, location, type, cost. And there are also policies in the official plan that speak to new development having respect to compatibility and character. The current zoning of the property is R2-1, and the proposed zoning would maintain that R2 base zoning, but the retained and proposed severed lots would have site-specific zoning provisions that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So just to summarize, this chart summarizes the required minimum lot frontage and minimum lot area under the R2 zone that applies to these lands. And before road widenings are taken off, the proposed retained lot, which is a corner lot, would a minimum frontage of 21.5 meters would be required. So this would be the frontage, while 20.1 is the existing situation. But with a road widening coming off of Park, that frontage actually gets reduced down to 17.6, and that's the ask for frontage on the retained lot. For the severed lot, it actually meets the minimum frontage requirement, which is 18 meters, and it's 18 meters for an interior lot. That's why it's different than the 21.5. 21.5 is a greater lot frontage requirement for corner lots. When it comes to lot area, for a corner lot, the minimum requirement is 795.5 square meters. What's proposed is 618.2. But again, because the town is requiring a road widening, it actually brings down the requested minimum lot area down to 488.5. And then similarly with the severed lot, for an interior lot, the minimum lot area requirement is 666. What is without the road widening, it'd be 362.7. But again, because of the road widening requirement, the requested minimum lot area is 317.6. And so again, this is a quick summary of the requested relief that's being asked for on the retained and severed lots. On the retained lot, I talked about the minimum lot area and frontage. They're also asking require a reduction to the minimum lot depth requirement, which is 37 meters. This lot would, if created, would be 27.7 meters. The minimum front yard being requested is 2.1 meters, whereas the minimum setback is 6. I should state that without the lot frontage, the road widening conveyance, this would actually be, I think it's 5.25 meters, so close to the minimum required, but because of the road widening requirement, they do need to ask for 2.1. This is the exterior side yard, and they are needing a 2.8 meter setback, whereas 6 meters is required. But once again, I believe the existing situation is 5.5 meters over here. So not too far from the current requirement. And I should note that this is an existing situation. And then lastly, they need a variance from the bylaw to recognize the encroachment of the existing dwelling in the required daylight site triangle. So there's a 10.8 by 10.8 meter site daylight triangle that would extend here. This is an existing situation, so they need relief to recognize that existing situation. The Public Works Department has looked at that, has no objection to that, again, because it's an existing circumstance. And then we have the severed lot. I talked about the requested reduction in the lot area and the lot area. They require a reduction to 17.6 meters for lot depth, whereas 37 is required. They're asking for a 5.5 meter setback, whereas 6 is the minimum, a minimum rear yard of 5, whereas 7 is the minimum. And then lastly, there's in the R2 zone, there's a minimum gross flare area requirement of 100 square meters. They would be coming in just under at 97.9 meters. And that's my overview, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll invite the applicant and their agent who are with us this evening, Scott McIntosh and Leah Richards from Zelenka Primo, to make a presentation to council, and please come forward. Thank you. Just need to press the button there.
Thank you. Good evening, council members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Aaliyah Richards, and I am a planning consultant with Zelinka Priamo Limited. I'm pleased to be here this evening on behalf of the property owner for this combined future severance and zoning bylaw amendment application. I'd like to thank staff for their continued work on this application and for the positive recommendation to council. We're hopeful of a positive endorsement from council tonight, and given that this proposed development is in alignment with all levels of current planning policy, which encourage gentle intensification in locations such as the subject lands. Thank you for your time, and I'll gladly answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Edney?
Thank you, through your worship. It's not so much a question, but kind of a comment. This is the very thing that the province, and for that matter, the country, have been asking us to undertake. And because I walk by there every single day, I've been able to stop and kind of get a vision of it. And I think it works really well. Yeah, I think it works really well. My only concern, and I normally leave this to Councillor Pridham to voice, would be parking. Will there be a two-car driveway on Park Street?
I'd like to thank you for your first comment, and to answer your question, there is a slight discrepancy on that plan that was shown with the showing the two lots for severance. When this application was relooked at, we evaluated that, and we changed the site plan to actually accommodate a 5.5 meter wide parking area and driveway for that front, for the newly proposed lot. And then we kind of balanced that with the backyard. So we needed the rear yard, the special provision for the rear yard setback as a result of that. So in the most up-to-date concept plan, it does show parking for 2 spaces. So there is no variance required for that.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Okay, thank you both for attending this evening. We don't have anyone in the gallery this evening, but I'll put it out just to see if there was anything received online, just in case, further to the clerk. Nothing else? Okay. Any final comments from the applicant and the agent? Anyone want to say anything? Okay, Councillor Pridham.
Thank you. The site triangle that's kind of going to be obstructed a little bit. There's some trees along the roadway there. Are they coming down to assist? Because right now, I think there's some trees that interfere with that triangle anyway.
So the site triangle will not be taken as dedication. So no trees will be coming down as a result of that. However, trees may come down as a result of the proposed road windings. So within that triangle, it's an existing condition. The house is already located there, so that will not necessarily be taken as land dedication.
It was really just the trees. I think there's some cedar trees along that road, and they're quite big and overgrown, and I wondered if some of those would come down to allow more sightline.
If I can just add, Leah's correct. There will be a road widening, but of course the town is not building, widening the paved section of that road. So there's no intent to remove any trees in the daylighting triangle or make that a requirement. Of course, Public Works will take a look at this, especially when we get to the consent stage, but there's no intent or direction from the town, our town staff, to have those trees removed. We always like to keep trees if and when possible, unless there's a sight line concern, then we would have to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from council? Okay, thank you. Unless there's anything further from the applicants or from council, we'll bring the meeting to a close. I'd like to thank those who participated in this meeting. When a decision is made regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application, notice will be provided as prescribed by the Planning Act, and the 20-day appeal period to the Ontario Land Tribunal would apply. Okay. So moving on then, we will move on to item number 6, acceptance of minutes. The minutes from the September 23rd, 2025 meeting were published. Are there any errors, omissions, or problems with the minutes as published? Seeing nothing, I'll seek a motion that September 23rd, 2025 regular council meeting minutes be approved by council. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Alward, seconded Councillor Edney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to item number 7, which is correspondence. We have a few pieces of correspondence. The first being a letter from Mr. Scott Leyland regarding a water bill, and the suggested motion that gets referred for discussion later in the evening when we talk about the water policy, forgiveness policy. But does anyone have any questions with regards to this correspondence for now? I'll put it out there then that the correspondence from Scott Leyland regarding a water bill be received and referred for consideration with staff report PW 53-2025. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Lucas, second by Councillor Alward. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. The second item is with regards to Community Living St. Mary's Disability Employment Awareness Month. Any questions or comments with regards to the correspondence? Okay, there is a suggested motion. I'll put it on the floor then that the correspondence from Community Living St. Mary's regarding the Lighted Up 2025 campaign received, and that council proclaim October 2025 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month in St. Mary's. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Pridham, seconder Councillor Edney. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 7.3, the next piece of correspondence is with regards to ICI recycling collection. Any comments or questions with regards to this? The suggestion is refer to staff because I personally am getting a headache reading so much conflicting information. And I think there is a lot. This is, in all seriousness, Councillor Craig Miles isn't here, but I think this has been a difficult one for staff to balance because the needle keeps changing as to what's going to happen here. I think that's a fair comment. So I'll put the motion on the floor as suggested if everyone's okay. Councillor Alward, do you have something?
The only thing I would offer, I did report on some of the previous correspondence and the previous reports we've received to the BIA this previous evening. There is significant concern with cost downloading to the good folks in the BIA. So I think that will be something they seem to be sort of out of touch with in this correspondence, but I guess we will see how things go. So thank you.
Okay, yeah. Preliminary, the last time we discussed this, we had some discussion about going forward and how we'd handle that, and there was some confusion as to what terms would happen. So this would cover, staff will note those concerns, and when we get to the discussion, we can talk about
Absolutely.
that for sure. But thank you for bringing that up. Anything further? Okay, I'll put it on the floor then. The correspondence from Alan Langdon, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and Blue Water Recycling Association be received, and the staff report back to council regarding the impact to the town of the recent correspondence related to the producer responsibility organization's Blue Box decision for industrial, commercial, and institutional properties. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Alward, second by Councillor Pridham. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to reports, 8.1 admin. I have the first one, the Milt Dunhill Field project. I believe Ms. Deeks is going to join us as well if there's something, or?
Ms. Deeks will join us for the Heritage Festival rebranding project.
All right, fair enough.
Yep. So I'll stick handle this one, Your Worship. And so, Council, it's been since August 2023 that we had a touch point and discussed the Milt Dunhill Field project. Since then, the project has sat in abeyance as we waited for the Recreation Master Plan. And the primary purpose of putting it on hiatus was we were expecting there to be recommendations in the Recreation Master Plan as it related to the baseball diamonds down at Milt Dunhill Field. At that point in time, we weren't certain that there'd be a recommendation in the Rec Master Plan that we keep them at Milt Dunhill Field, and we felt that we needed to have that information before moving forward and developing ideas on how we might implement council's direction related to future visions for the park. We all know by now that things have changed around baseball, and the baseball will be relocating down to Milt Dunhill Field, and it appears that that'll be a permanent relocation. So with that clarity piece for us, we reconstituted a staff team in September to start talking about the Milt Dunhill Field project. And essentially our approach was to look at the direction that council gave us in August 2023 and to reflect on all the priority items that council had given us direction to move forward and implement in the immediate term, as well as those that council had given us direction on to look at for future visioning. So when you look at the direction that council had given to us, I think the first three have been implemented, which are the washroom upgrades, accessible dock, farmers market paving, and the fourth being the gutter boards. And at that point in time, we ran out of money through the federal funding that we'd received. So everything that when you're looking at page 32 from priority item number 5 and 6 on, and then all of your long-term items have sat not implemented for 2 years. So from staff's perspective, we first wanted to center ourselves on what the goal of this project was. And I think through the public consultation 2 years ago, we certainly had a mixed message in that in-person consultation led us to believe that the public was willing to see some change down at the park. But the overwhelming response in correspondence after those visions were put forward that showed the ring road changing was that the public really liked the park the way it was. They felt it was functioning and that we shouldn't see significant change at the park. So that's the frame of reference that staff have approached this from, is that we believe that the park is functioning, it's working well, it's well used. So we really wanted to develop a list of ideas of how we might make incremental improvement to the park. So attached to the report, what you will see is we've taken each of your priority items that you have listed as being important moving forward, and we asked ourselves, how might we implement this in the future, and what other ideas do we have to make an improvement in this area? So what you see attached to this report is not a plan that staff are asking for council to say, yes, we are okay with this and we want you to move forward and implement. It really is a result of staff's brainstorming to say, a number of us are residents here, we experience the park too. What is some of our institutional knowledge tell us of incremental things we can do just to improve the user experience down here? And then what would be our next step if we wanted to implement it? This is very much more like an SPC style report where I'm looking for your feedback tonight as well, because you are residents of St. Mary's, you engage with users of the park. If there are other ideas that you have that we could add to this list, we would appreciate that. And we're just gonna really look at it as a working list of ideas that as time permits or as opportunities arise to implement, we will then bring forward those initiatives to council and say, okay, now today is a time where we can bring forward and have the ability to implement a pavilion. Do you agree with the pavilion going forward? And if the answer is yes, then we would put it in the budget, and then we'd go through a process as we typically do of doing the design, bringing it back to council and whatnot. So that's the first purpose of this report. The first purpose of this report is I really want council to do some brainstorming and to give us an idea of other ideas that you might have that we can add to this list. Or if there's things on this list you don't like, tell us and we'll take them off, and we're happy to do that. The second is really to give you a heads up that you're going to receive this budget binder in a few minutes, and then when you go through it in the next few weeks, you'll notice that we have put a budget sheet in for Milton Park because we know some of your critical items that you had told us to implement haven't been implemented. So we put the draft budget with a proposal to implement a few of them, and we'd like your feedback through the budget process whether you'd like to see those move forward. And it's also just to make you aware that there are some changes that are easily absorbed into 2026 operations. And you'll see those happen starting next year. Like things like mowing the grass all the way to the river so we knock down weeds. That's a very simple way to improve river views. If you're down there at River's Edge, you'll notice that we have a number of overgrown trees that need some pruning. We're gonna start pruning those next year so that, again, we can open up the view of the river and make it won't be less naturalized, it'll just be less overgrown is probably a better way to say it. So for me, because I'm out of SPC meetings for the rest of the year, really this is an SPC style report where I just appreciate a two-way conversation with council on, what do you think of staff's ideas? Do you have any other ideas? And we'd like to amend their list, and then it'll be much like council's list of priorities every year. It'll be sitting there on our desks so that when we have the time or the opportunity arises to start implementing, we can pick it off the list and work it into our work plans every year.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from council? Councilor Redney.
Thank you, through your worship. A priority for me just visually is the whole point was to make this the primary, it's the first thing people come in and see really of the town as they come down, and the natural beauty is out of this world. And if you're going the other way, it's the last thing you see before you leave town. The pavilion can't be prettied up anymore.
Correct. At one point in time, I think at the staff level, another constraint we put on ourselves is that we want this to be cost effective. We don't want this to be another $1 million revitalization of a park. This is truly styled more as a refresh that, let's be honest, the baseball diamonds, they look tired. The pavilion, it looks tired. Things need to be just refreshed. If this is a very important park. It holds a lot of sentimental value and iconic value to the town, but it looks tired, and we need to make it look like we've thought about the users. That's kind of the whole frame of reference staff have had, that I want a user to go there and to be going to do something like, wow, I can't believe they thought of that. I can't believe they thought about knocking down the weeds at the fishing spot at the northern end, because we know people are using that. That was a really good idea. We did look at the pavilion, and the building department's opinion is it's not built to code. And if you go down and you start looking at even just like the posts that are in the ground, it's starting to rot. It's a tear down now. It will have to be a rebuild. And what we understand from our previous experience with the Upper Thames is that we already have that footprint. It already exists. It's already a hazard in the floodplain, so we can recreate that footprint, but we can't expand upon it. So when you see the budget package come forward, you'll see a budget sheet in there that has a list of projects for this year. Like rebuilding the dugouts, adding dugouts to the baseball diamond, because that's a nice addition. We're going to refresh the bleachers down there using the existing frames and a few other minor things. The major thing is the pavilion, because it's in this day and age, a pavilion of that scale is probably going to be around $200,000, $250,000.
Councillor Howard?
Thanks, Your Worship. Something that piqued my interest was the potential for new parking area off the Jardine Street road allowance. Is that far enough out of the floodplain to actually pave there, or do we have any idea?
Probably not. So that's a perfect example of, that's a great staff brainstorm idea, but it's nothing that we could ever want to implement without a lot of consultation with the neighbors, a lot of discussion with the Upper Thames, and then to bring it to council, because that, of the contentious things that we're suggesting in here, adding parking there would, I think, be, let's just say, probably an annoyance at the outset to the neighbors, because it's changing it. There are ways for us to make arguments, like we did with the paving area down at the farmers market to the Upper Thames, that it is permissible and okay in the floodplain. I think at the time the argument we had made with the Upper Thames is that heavily and tightly packed, granular A is almost similar porosity to pavement, and the Upper Thames is able to buy off on that, and then we're allowed to pave. So it would be the same thing, but it's a good idea. Like when you think of what we've talked about in the last year of, like, we need to add parking in and around the downtown within a 5-minute walkability, that is certainly a low-hanging fruit piece of property, but it's going to take some time, discussion, and research before we do it. And again, a lot of that discussion will happen at this table.
I guess I just had a question about the pavilion. Just what type of amenities would be available because there's been all sorts of discussion over the years about a stage, about the ability to show movies, power, Wi-Fi, all those type of things. Like what type of amenities would be at the pavilion? Would there be water there? Would there be?
At this point in time, we haven't gotten into design, but that's exactly the type of feedback we'd like to hear, because I know the building department staff are on here. So what we did at the staff level, again, was we collected feedback from people like the farmers market and others who've used it to say, like, these are things that they don't like. Birds can get in and roost, and that makes it difficult. We would love to see it hard surfaced if we could. Wind screening is important. So if water is something we'll look at. There's water in the park. There's water nearby in terms of drinking water at the washrooms. Wi-Fi is TBD. It's not easy to get Wi-Fi in that park, and we expect it might be costly. So we do want to take some time to look at whether or not we can actually get Wi-Fi in the park. We've heard that loud and clear, that it's an amenity that would be important. I think for now, most people, the one thing you'll likely see forward as we, when you look at the budget package, it'll include money for designing the pavilion as well, and like a small amount of money for designing it, and then the construction. We would like to see the pavilion move, I'll say it for lack of a better term, to the east, to open up the green space closer to the river, and to use the hill, and then it opens up the view. Probably have all storage condensed to the east side as well, so that again, everything is open to the east or to the west, facing the river. And that's about as far as we've gotten along with staff's ideas on the design. But I'll make note of those as we go forward. Say, here's some important amenities. Like, electrical is important, water is important. The ability to maybe use it for things like we do down at CADSA, where we could do a screening, that could be important, and see as much of it we could.
I guess that just that, if the intention is it gets more use, we may want to do some consultation with the server.
Yep.
Councilor Prudhomme. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, through your worship. The pavilion was something that was on my mind as well. And we'd had a previous discussion, and you'd mentioned, Brent, about moving the pavilion to the east. And my concern is is there enough space for overflow for chairs and that sort of thing around the pavilion? I want to keep that in mind when you're looking at placement of the pavilion and placement of the dugouts as well. If you're putting in infrastructure for dugouts, are they going to interfere with a potential area where people could sit and enjoy a movie or some other outdoor activity that could be hosted within the pavilion? So I'm not sure if that would mean aligning the dugout slightly different or some sort of placement to keep that green space in mind for the pavilion events.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, comments with regards to the proposal? Councillor Alward?
Thanks again, Your Worship. Just with regards to number 15 with the seating areas and river viewing areas, in the chart, it references the success of this partially relies on getting vehicle parking to the inside of the ring road. And we're also discussing a potential kind of walking path around the ring road. So the idea would be is you'd have the walking path on sort of the outer rim, and then the parking is all on that left side, and it just kind of narrows the actual driving kind of lane. Yeah.
Yeah, so the ring, again, we know the ring road is, for lack of a better term, it's sacred to people's hearts. And the ability to park and take a look at the river is also something that we heard was very important through the consultations. However, we also equally heard from people that being able to safely walk around that perimeter is important to them. And one of the other things we heard from folks is that when I'm sitting there and I'm having my picnic and I'm sitting on the bench trying to enjoy the river, it's kind of frustrating to have a vehicle parked on top of me that's not mine. And so really the only opportunity to try and balance everybody's needs is to make a drastic change in terms of the use of the park and push parking to the inside. It's good in theory right now. However, Public Works needs some time to make sure that the road geometry all along that side would support an adequate width for parking, driving lane, and then also walking as well. So the thing we didn't want to do was go identify a significant number of areas for new seating that just really doesn't become used or there's conflict with parking. So right now, Public Works will look at the geometry of the road over the next year or so to sort out whether or not that's a change that could happen. Again, we bring it to council and say, do we need to add just some extra hard surfacing if we're allowed to by the Upper Thames? Does it just need to be lines that are painted to make it clear? And then with the seating areas, what our vision was is that, again, that's one that we don't probably need to invest a lot of money in. There's always a willingness from families to make donations of memorial benches, and this is a great place to be opportunistic, that if a person wants to donate a bench, it can now be seated along the ring road after the fact. And once we start, again, grooming closer to the river, and when I say grooming, I'm not talking about like knocking down the growth, the aquatic growth that's in the river. I'm just talking about, let's just cut to the river's edge like you see in Stratford. Then we'll get a better sense of like where proper river viewing areas are. So it's likely not something that'll happen in the next year for river viewing areas in terms of adding new, because we'd really like to see whether or not we can make that change with the ring road. And again, whether or not, likely Council of the Day supports it, and likely, again, just given the sensitivity around the ring road, it would be something that we probably would want to do some minor public consult on as well.
Thank you. Just from the chart that was compiled, all of I don't even know where it is now, the survey that was done and the chart that came out, the one thing that was highly important in all of those questions, there was one thing, and it was Riverview, and it topped the chart as far as comparators in that survey. So yeah, I think it really is important that it come back to council, and that whomever council is, whenever it comes back, has an opportunity to look at whatever you're proposing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, comments from council? Councilor Lucas?
Thank you, through the mayor. Just to follow up on that again, I think that's when we do look at that ring road, the parking for me, because generally when I use that park, it's as a pedestrian, and it absolutely drives me bonkers when I have to walk and dodge cars all along the edge, people playing video games and sitting in their car while it's idling, and it's like, I just want to be able to walk along the river's edge. So that's me, and again, that's my user experience, but I think we should be able to find some sort of a happy medium where people can still drive along there, but they maybe don't get front row seating, is kind of how I look at it. I think pedestrians, and that came from our traffic study as well, that pedestrians are the most important. So I think that needs to continue on in that space as well.
Councillor Edney?
Thank you, Worship. I just want to add a note to Councillor Lucas's thought there. I like it too, because I also believe that if we're forced to not to the riverside, but to the other side, there's going to be less idling. I think it'll almost create less idling, because if they're there to look at the river, they're going to have to get out and actually look. So that was one of my main concerns. I think a couple of years ago, I went down at one point and there were 15 cars at lunch parked along there, and there were only 2 that weren't running, and it was summer. So there was air conditioning going on as well. So there's a lot of idling. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from council? Okay, is that good enough to start? Yeah.
Yes, I do. I just leave you with a thought-provoking question of, is there anything else when you go down to the park you ever see in your mind, I wish they had thought about that? Because if there is, we'd love to add it to the list now, because I think what we're trying to do is have a very practical plan that keeps the park the way it is, and just, like I said, make incremental improvements, really call this a refresh, so we spruce the park up and just make something that's great just a little bit better. So if you have those ideas, if I've put you on the spot too much and you circle back and have a different idea, don't be afraid to reach out, because this really is just a working document that is our brainstorm, I guess, where we collect all of our brainstorm ideas. And I don't look at anything as concrete in stone. Each thing is going to be kind of brought forward in its own right and brought forward to council if it makes sense. So cutting grass to the river's edge, I doubt you, I've let you know, I doubt you really want to deliberate on that too much, but things like new parking areas, pavilions, the ring road, for certain, you're going to deliberate on that in the future.
Councillor Pridham, sure.
Just one thought, and I don't know how easy it is to service hydro along the ring road or along a pathway, but solar lighting is something that could be utilized and light the way.
Okay, anything further? Councillor Allward?
Thanks, Your Worship. Actually, I was wondering, so I know we had plans to have the kayak shack and stuff down at the flats. I'm not certain, is that still the case, or how does that function in its current form?
Like our municipal yak shack? Yeah. For the foreseeable future, yes, it'll stay down at the flats. How at one point in time we talked about having a student there permanently. I don't think we felt that it's not a full-time job to sit there all day, every day. So I think, as far as I'm aware, the current system seems to be working with incremental improvements.
So I guess really my question is if we were going to have staff down there or somebody down there, because the only thing I could really think of to add would be some sort of kind of information-centric, either a poster board, cork board, whatever you got kind of thing. Because I think that if you get sort of general tourism-based information down there, I think it'd be good to have. That's why I saw the staff member as potentially being valuable, but I think this is a good offset if you'll consider that.
No, we'll flag that as part of our signage plan as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? All right, so subject to budget approval, we're going to go through with looking at the pavilion and so forth. What's kind of the timeline for some of the other things? I'm sure this is going to be a multi-year.
Yeah. So again, when you flip through the chart, we did our best to kind of flag things that'll happen next year. So there's a, we want the playground. We think is a priority, just because it's something that we had talked about a few years ago, but didn't have the time to implement it. And it really would be nice to make some accessibility improvements there. Things related to baseball and making the baseball experience better is important to us now that we know that we're going to be relocating baseball there. Pest control is important because, again, we know that there's a lot of geese, and the hawk kites seem to have a radius of effectiveness. So if we add a few more, maybe it'll help. And then again, the pavilion's the last big outstanding thing that when you look at it, it just looks very tired. Other things like drainage will take a couple of years. We need, you're never going to be able to drain something that's below water level anyways, but we might be able to make improvements for those seasonal rains because we do have storm drains there. So I know we're hiring a drainage engineer to help us figure out if field tile makes sense is something that's going to happen. Things like the ring road will take next year it'll be more of a research year, and we'll report back later in the year, likely pre-budget again to the council of the day. And I'm trying to think about any of the other major ones. Those are probably the two most major ones I would look at. So it's most of it, your top priority items from a couple of years ago we've put in the budget for next year. Things that are easy to absorb into operations like mowing and pruning are going to be adopted into next year as well. And everything else is you're looking at 27, 28.
Okay. Any questions for Councilor Lucas?
Thank you, through Mayor. Just to follow up on that, and the feedback from the community has been the improvements have been really awesome and well received. So I think we're definitely on the right path, and I like the thought of small incremental changes, but they're definitely noticeable and appreciated by the town.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from council? Okay. So I'll put the motion on the floor then, if that covers everything, that admin. You want to specifically add them? Or I was just going to put modifications period, but I'm easy.
Well, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'd style this more of like a strategic priorities where I left an open-ended list to be filled in by council. So I guess it just depends on, I heard feedback on the pavilion, lighting, and an information center.
Okay. You want me to add those 3 items to the motion? Is that?
I think that's council's prerogative.
Yeah. Sure, if you don't mind. Councilor Albert, were you going to add something as well?
I was just going to suggest that I would like to see those suggestions put on the motion. Yeah.
I think there's consensus. Okay. Councilor Reddy, yeah.
Through your worship, this is no impact at all on the motion, but I just wanted to mention it that in both plans that we had drawn up before, a basketball court was included. I hope that is just in the vision somewhere down the door, because, and I say this because I don't believe the basketball-loving playing demographic was represented in any of they're not the ones that are going to write letters. They're not the ones that are going to show up at the farmer's market. So we haven't had a basketball court in a while, and it's doing quite well up at the school with the program there. So it wouldn't hurt just to know that that's still somewhere in the mind of they.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so everyone can see on the screen Does this capture, Councilor Elwood, this captures your intent?
Yeah, this captures my intent entirely. Thank you.
Councilor Pridham, I believe you had a couple, okay? Okay, so I'll put the motion on the floor that amend 46-2025 Milt Donald Field, the Flats project update be received, and that council direct staff to make the following modifications and additions to the list proposed Milt Donald Field improvements, placement of a pavilion and dugouts to preserve as much green space as possible, solar lighting along the pedestrian pathway, basketball court, communication board with tourism information. Councilor Elwood,
Oh, I was just going to move the motion.
move the motion. Seconder, Councilor Edney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next report, 8.2, which is the distribution of staff's proposed 2026 capital and operating budget.
So again, so council, just a very brief overview. So this is our first annual budget under the new strong mayor powers enacted by the province. So we had discussed timelines in July about how we might maintain a budget process that looked as similar as it has in the last few years. So at that point in time, our former director of corporate services and treasurer had outlined a timeline for council that would see us tabling the budget on October 21st. October 14th, in anticipation of your first budget meeting on October 21st. In your agenda, I've replicated the timelines that he had shown that day. And when you look at it, you'll notice that some of the statutory periods as it relates to council's ability to make amendments to the budgets, and then the mayor's ability to veto, and then council's ability to override those vetoes will fall over our holidays. So one of the things we had talked about in July was that if council was satisfied with the budget after you had reviewed it, then you would pass a resolution that reduces your statutory period to make amendments from 30 days down to 10, so that we could be on track to have the budget deemed adopted by council on December 16th. That's, I think, the path we all want to go down, because then it allows staff to get working on the capital budget earlier next year, and then avoids that complication of over the holidays, and it means that we don't have to wait until February to keep the process as similar as we could. So what we were presenting to council tonight, and I'll hand out in a moment, is staff's proposed budget. The reason why we're calling this staff's proposed budget is first and foremost because the mayor's had no input into it. So this is truly staff's development of the budget as we have in previous years, using council's 4% target as a guide. And it allows you the freedom and flexibility to debate it, to make amendments to it without any of the legislation related to strong mayor powers coming into effect. So in essence, by tabling staff's proposed budget, it's a workaround to avoid those statutory deadlines. So like I said, assuming that everybody is fine with the budget after we've met on October 21st, staff would then work with the mayor to make any amendments to the budget, and then we would table the mayor's budget effectively on November 11th, and that kicks in all of those statutory deadlines. So, as I mentioned in the report, the only thing that is kind of a consequence of our timelines is community grants. So in the past, we had considered and deliberated on community grants while the budget was still open. But unfortunately, under this process, community grants won't really have closed, and we won't have time to have looked at them in any sort of detail by the time your budget process is over. But I would try to communicate in the report is that the budget amount in there is the same. You always, as council, have the right to approve variances to your budget. So if you want to oversubscribe the program, you would just approve a variance in a transfer from reserve, and you wouldn't have any sort of issues with strong mayor powers because you're not levying any new money. So it wouldn't be considered a budget amendment. It'd just be a budget variance you're approving as you had in the past. So it's similar to, we'll be on a similar timeline as previous years, where we'll look at community grants in January or February. And in our experience in the past is that we've actually never oversubscribed the program. Council's always taken their option to prorate and to see just fit within the budget that we have. So if there's any question on process, I'm happy to take them. If not, then I'm going to hand out your budget binder, and I expect you'll be up studying it all night tonight because it's riveting stuff.
Any questions? Okay.
That's it? Okay. Yeah. So. And before I do close, that was a great reminder. I'm actually not the treasurer. We have an acting treasurer who is Mr. Spencer Steckley, and I just have to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that he has personally invested into this budget over the last few weeks. I know he's had a number of long nights and very short weekends pulling the budget together. It's his first municipal budget, but I'd have to say you would never know that. He's done a more than fine job on pulling it together. So it's I think when you read through it, it has the same look and feel and approach as every other budget we've tabled with this council in the last few years, and I think we'll have a pretty successful day on October 21st.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions? All right, so I'll put the motion on the floor then, that admin 47-2025 distribution of staff's proposed 2026 capital and operating budget report be received, and the council acknowledges the receipt of staff's proposed 2026 capital and operating budget. So I'm willing to move that motion. Moved by Councillor Edney, second by Councillor Pridham. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, up next, item 8.3, and we have Ms. Deeks here to talk about the Heritage Festival 2026. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Through the Mayor and Council, the report in front of you has kind of two recommendations within it. The first is I've provided some background into the 2025 festival that we held this past year, including some data that we received this year. We were successful with the RTO4 to partner on receiving data fencing, basically, which is cell phone data for some of our events and tourism locations, so we can get a sense of where people are coming from and how long they're staying. So I've included a report that was done by our summer student in regards to that data that we received for this past year. In addition to the report is some thoughts that staff have in regards to the 2026 festival, which I've also taken this report to our BIA already. So they have seen the report and concur with what's been proposed. So the general Stonetown Heritage Festival was held as per usual this past year, July 12th, which is generally the festival, other than the year we had homecoming, has been held on the third weekend of the month of July, which is the Saturday. It's technically a one-day festival. We have predominantly advertised it as a 3-day festival. My understanding is it's an opportunity to package some of the other events that are occurring kind of as a bookend to the day-long festival. In addition, it's previously helped us with receiving grant funding due to a festival being more than one day. I will say we haven't been successful with grants necessarily when it comes to this festival because there is so little happening on those other days. But we definitely receive strong community support to fund the Heritage Festival and did so again this past year. Some of the observations that we've had over the last couple of years, I would say since pandemic, has been that the festival is obviously very dependent on weather. And it's a one-day event. We have had that disappointment of weather postponing events and canceling activities due to thunderstorms. We've also dealt with extreme heat now for 2 years in a row, which has shortened some of the vendor stays that we've had out on the street for the festival. So it's definitely been a challenge for us. This past year, one of the challenges we also faced was a lack of volunteer recruitment. We had quite a few events take place in St. Mary's the end of June, early July this past year due to some changes with the weekend of the Baseball Hall of Fame. The Hospital Foundation Gala was this past year, which is held every other year. We had the Canada Day festivities. The first ever Stonetown Triathlon was held, and the Kinsman Summerfest was moved forward this past year due to their midway contracts. So we basically had all summer events wrapped up by July 12th. Luckily, we had doors open this year, which gave us more to promote for August, and that event was very successful. So as part of this plan, we're talking already about 2026. We have been approached by the Kinsmen about doing a partnership with them during the Summerfest weekend, which is going back to their usual weekend, which is that second last weekend in July. I think it's the 21st. I have it written in here. So the proposal is that the Kinsmen Summerfest would run Thursday through Sunday as per usual. It would encompass all the usual activities that the Kinsmen do, which is the Midway and their music performances that take place in the flats during the evening. So this proposal is that we turn summer sort of July, I'll say, with a little bit of the end of June, because we would include the induction weekend and the Rotary Brews and Foods Festival as part of our kind of summer series marketing plan, where we would market all existing events such as those, the Lions Car Show, the Horticultural Fair, and other events that are occurring within St. Mary's over the summer, but also add to that with our own. So we're looking at running the Heritage Bus Tour through the month of July, a couple of days, possibly running Heritage walking tours with the assistance, either volunteers or doing some more partnership with the Stratford Walking Tours, which has launched the Ghost Tour here. We've explored doing more art events with the Station Gallery, and he's excited to potentially launch into some of his ideas for summer programming and events. In addition to that, we'd like to look at working on some sort of a local music talent busker idea for downtown, where we'd have music happening possibly within the downtown core throughout the entire month of July on various days. I know the BIA has also talked about doing some events in their own planning through the month of July, and we would encompass that as to some sort of a series, Heritage Summer Series, with it wrapping up with that one-day Heritage Street Festival that we typically do. So it would look very much the same as it does every year. It would be a different Saturday because it would fall on the Kinsmen Summerfest weekend. And instead of the town organizing a street dance, which we have done for several years, and I will say it has not been well attended, the music would then just take place in the flats with the Kinsmen organizing that part of it. So a couple things we've talked about with the Kinsmen is we would try to initiate use of the waterways a little more, which is something we've been trying to do for years since the Bannakin Tourism and Travel plan that we worked on, where they recommended trying to utilize our waterways a little more with this event. I'd like to do even music along the trails potentially next summer, as well as doing our art along the trail in the flats during the Saturday morning market, during the Heritage Festival Day. This year we tried to do it on McGivern Island, but it was not well attended. We did promote it. We tried to get people to walk down that little pathway to it, and it just wasn't well attended. It was also not well attended when we had it along the trail towards Riverwalk Commons the year before. So I think partnering up with the farmers market events and having some of the artists down along the flats would be a nice way to bring them a little more exposure. So we'd like to try something like that this year. And then the Midway would be still in the flats, and we're looking at bringing in kind of an old-fashioned trolley train that we would use as that connector between the downtown street and the flats throughout the day. We would still offer shuttles, and really the only difference for the actual day would be that the street would reopen hopefully around 6 o'clock instead of keeping it closed for an evening street dance. So what I'm looking for this evening from council is, first of all, that the report for 2025 is received. I think this was our events coordinator's first Heritage Festival, and I would say it went off very well. I think we've done a lot of work in the last couple years to build relationships with our early learning staff members who have really participated in that Kids Zone element of the festival, and the BIA as well, and all of our service clubs who are really engaged with what we're doing and want to be part of it. The other piece of it is I have met with the Rotary. The Rotary has typically done the fireworks. I will say there hasn't been a full agreement amongst the club over their interest in fireworks. So I'm not sure if that's going to be 100% sponsored by them next year. But what my proposal to them was that if they want to stick with fireworks, we would look at doing Canada Day fireworks instead, because we wouldn't be able to let off fireworks with the Kinsman Summerfest going on in the flats after the festival. So we would just look at doing those fireworks. If the community felt strongly about fireworks, we could do them at another time. And the Rotary has also, I've given other options for potential partnerships and engagement with the festival, including things like the trolley or other ideas that they seemed interested in. So I know we will have Rotary engagement one way or another, as well as part of that weekend. As always, they've always been very keen to be part of those things. So, and we hope we can provide more marketing, and Morgan has done really well with our social media. And I think that we can do some more promotion for things like Rotary Brews and Foods and the Lions Car Show, et cetera, as part of that overall package. So I think we're on a good plan for bringing it kind of all together and trying to enhance those partnerships. So I guess I'm just looking at council's support that we do embark on kind of trying this out for a year, this partnership with the Kin Summerfest. I think it also pools our funding resources. I'm sure it wasn't lost on anybody that the Kinsman and the town had the same headlining musical act back-to-back weekends. And both of us received sponsorship funding for that act. So in conversations with the Kinsman, it probably would allow for them to go after maybe some higher dollars to get in a bigger name to perform at the Summerfest for that Saturday evening. They're also doing a local night, which will be Thursday. So they're bringing in all local talent, which is another thing we can look to highlight throughout the month, where we're also potentially highlighting that local talent downtown before they perform in the flats, which was also a recommendation by Banneken, was that we move the musical performances to the flats. And we haven't done that yet, so that is the report. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Pridham?
Thank you. It seems well thought out, and it will be nice to see the change and see how that works with the downtown. I'm sure that you have all this figured. I'm a little worried about traffic traveling from one area to the other, pedestrian and or that little train, because you'll still have to keep the road open on Water Street, I would imagine.
There we go. Now, the street closure would be the same. So Water Street we've closed Water Street basically to the Green Bridge for the festival, and we would do that again because for the daytime, that's generally where we do our food area kind of down before the Green Bridge. So we would keep that open. Traffic's definitely been something that I have had a concern about. Mostly also just road closure in the main street. So Public Works has been really supportive to help us, and so has Stratford Police. And so we will have further conversations about that. Generally, we've kept parts of Wellington Street open other than the intersection of Queen. But you can access Wellington from either side. And towards, and of course, Church Street is the one I'm looking for. So those have always remained open. Really, the difference would be that the road opens earlier with this plan. because last year we didn't open the road till 11 o'clock p.m. And this year we would hope to open it by 6. We've also generally had a shuttle from the PRC to downtown, and we did get community feedback this past year about offering a shuttle from the other side of town. So we would look at possibly having a shuttle run maybe from the YMCA towards downtown, because that is an area we didn't offer a shuttle before, and there has been growth. So we will consider that as well.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Councillor Howard?
Thanks, Your Worship. I suppose I would say, just as a comment on my general take on this, I think it's a great idea to take all of our eggs out of one basket and kind of spread them ever so gently across the summer, as well as use this as an opportunity to feature and highlight other community organizations and their events and the things that we can't necessarily accomplish ourselves. I think that in my assessment of Heritage Festival, it matches pretty well exactly staff's assessment. The BIA, I've heard from a number of merchants and service businesses that Heritage Festival doesn't do a whole lot for them in general. There are some businesses, of course, that do quite well, but in general, they don't see a lot of shine off of the one-day event of Heritage Festival. So I think if we can create smaller events and more tourist drawing opportunities throughout the summer, they might see a little bit of economic offspin from this, and I think that that's something we should be considering. So I think this is a great idea. I'm very intrigued as to see how the pilot year goes.
Okay. Councillor Edney?
Thank you, through your worship. The one thing that I would suggest, and I'm going to sound like a broken record saying it, is that we get a busking bylaw so we can license them, especially if you're going to hold an event where it's busking, because musicians can be opportunistic, and you might have a flock of musicians downtown more than you care to have. I would think we'd need a busking license so that we could say this person is set up this time. It would just allow us more coordination.
If I may, maybe busking was the wrong word, because we would be booking people to bring them in. We're not just going to say, anyone want to perform on the street on this day? I've sort of got my own internal kind of name for what I would call it and everything, and have some music series and reach out to our local musical businesses to help us with finding local talent. And so, yeah, so it would be more formalized. So I hear what you're saying, because you're right. I think that is something we want to avoid, but it would be more formalized and sort of self-sufficient in a way. Like I would like to have that spot downtown, and then it just kind of continues on this day, and we will guarantee we are going to have musicians down there. So just to add that musical element to a Saturday or even a Friday is kind of what we're looking to do.
I just had a question about so we're eliminating the street dance per se. So are the Kinsmen going to have something in that time frame, or what's the vision? It'd just be nighttime entertainment, because we'll probably get the question about the family end of it.
So we are still going to do the Heritage Festival with like the kids zone, the family aspects to it all day, including some music downtown. And then basically the midway is still planned to open at 12. So that would be typical for the Kinsmen. Generally, our kids zone has closed by 4 p.m. for the festival anyway. So we haven't had kids activities throughout the evening other than the street dance for dancing. But we would host that sort of thing throughout the day as well. We would still have music where the children can participate by dancing, etc. We just wouldn't have the evening show.
Yeah, I guess my concern is going to be raised because the street dance is viewed as sort of a family event. So I guess if the question is raised, I understand we're maybe going to enhance some of the children's activity, but there'll be no 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock street dance. I mean, the fireworks are disappearing. That whole element, there could be some disappointment in the community because the street dance, in my view, I'd take my kids to the street dance. I wouldn't take them to the Kinsman beer tent, I guess is my point, right? So I just, it's going to be raised. It's, and it's going to be a concern because it's viewed as a family event, a non-drinking family event, and by eliminating, it's a big change.
Yeah, it would be different. As I noted before, the street dance has not been well attended for the last couple of years. There have been some families with kids for sure. It's definitely not a tourism draw. It's more of a community event. So it is for sure. And we don't have that street dance element with our Canada Day event, which we consider very much a community-run event at CADZO. So this would be a change, yes.
Okay. The other question I had is around sponsorship. How would that work? Because the town is still going to have expenses and things. And my past experience has been, you know, you get people, especially our volunteers, that sometimes run ahead of people. I'm sure you've experienced this as well. And you know, there could be clash in terms of overlap for sponsorship. How would that be sorted out?
We would be utilizing the same sponsorship other than a headlining musician. So we would still be doing some other musicians. For example, Troyers has always sponsored Saint Germain to perform, and he's generally wrapped up before the evening show kind of gets started. So we would be looking for community sponsorship for the usual things like our inflatables, Kids Zone, etc. But we would not be going after a sponsor for our headlining musical act.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Edney?
Thank you, through your worship. Just to put it in your bonnet, if, to the mayor's point, a magic show, 90-minute magic show upstairs would just be incredible. And they're usually extremely well attended. Many of the festivals that I've played at, they've had that element to it instead of the dance. So, yeah, just a note. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, thank you for the report. Anything we needed to add, Kelly? No?
No, like I said, I think we'll try this. And obviously, I'm always open to council feedback and making any kind of I know change is tough, so I'm always open to the feedback. It's just something we thought we could try.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the suggested motion is that COR 33-2025 Heritage Festival debrief and proposal for a 2026 Stonetown Heritage Summer Series report be received, and the council supports the implementation of the Stonetown Heritage Summer Series in collaboration between the Stonetown Heritage Festival and Kinsman Summerfest for 2026. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Alward, second by Councillor Pridham. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you for your report. Okay, item 8.4 with regards to the zoning bylaw amendment for 178 Thomas Street. Mr. Stone, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it brief. I just want to, though, speak to the recommendations. As you know, as a general rule, after a public meeting, staff will return to council at a later meeting, usually the next council meeting, with a final recommendation report. But as you'll recall, at the last council meeting, we heard that there was a desire to give council the option to consider approving applications on the same day as a public meeting. So that's why you're seeing a bit of a change in the recommendations. We've included a recommendation for approval if council determines it wants to proceed with a decision today. And again, you know, the application, in my view, it meets the community objective of providing housing in a compact form. It uses existing infrastructure. The proposed lot sizes are large enough to accommodate a house, parking, amenity area, and so on. I think what's proposed generally fits with the community. But we've added a second recommendation. If council does have some concerns, wants some additional analysis or reporting back, we've included the option of directing staff to report back. That's my summary, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions at this time from council? Okay, I'll entertain a motion if someone is so willing to put a motion on the floor. Councillor Lucas?
I'll put the motion on the floor to approve the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, so that would be the DEV 30-2025 application for zoning bylaw amendment Z03-2025 for 178 Thomas Street report be received, and the council approves the application for the zoning bylaw amendment Z03-2025 for 178 Thomas Street, and the council consider enacting zoning bylaw number Z161-2025. Moved by Councillor Lucas. Is there a seconder? Councillor Alward seconds. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion's carried. Right. Thank you for your report. So, moving on to item 8.5, we have a number of reports from Mr. Blake. The first one being information update regarding Ontario's environmental compliance policy, and this was on page 8 of your council package. If you're looking at it, just head back. It was put in the beginning. Mr. Blake, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is really an information report to council related to some updated compliance policy framework with the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks. So what they've done is they've updated their policy framework related to how they manage their incoming calls for complaints to agencies like Spills Action Center or just their general complaints hotline or tip line to kind of streamline their processes. In doing the webinar on what this really meant for the town of St. Mary's, they get a lot of nuisance complaints that come in related to odors, dust, and noise that generally or usually can fall under municipal bylaws. So the town has a noise bylaw. Does the ministry need to be taking in noise complaints and then dealing with noise complaints, or should that be consistently pushed back, or not pushed back, but delegated back to the municipality to enforce their bylaw? So that's kind of really what's the focus of the report, was to let council know that they've made some policy implementation changes to just streamline that, make it more transparent on their end so that when they get calls in, it's clear on how they're going to delegate that out or redirect accordingly. And from a staff's point of view, we don't really see a lot of impact for us. With what we do, we have a good working relationship with our local MECP branch already. So we kind of go back and forth on calls we get related to odor, noise, dust, stormwater, things like that. So we're already working with them on that and don't really see a lot of impact to our workload or staff allocation. But just wanted to make council aware that that policy change has taken effect, and we might get more referrals back to the community for some of those things within the community.
Okay, thank you. Questions? My concern, to be blunt, is this is a download in some respects and a dumping of work, and no disrespect to staff, but we may have some industries come to town or already exist that we don't have expertise in. And my experience in the past has been is that we've been able to use the ministry to smooth over some issues. I don't want to get into some of the specifics, but the reality is my concern is this could lead to further staff time and further cost to municipality. Also, there's been incidents in the past where we've been able to use the expertise and that, you know, to no disrespect, that may be lacking, and we aren't experts in certain fields. So this is a concern because this is a continuation of downloading from the province that, quite frankly, is upsetting. Now, I can understand that, yes, our bylaws, we have to enforce them and so forth, but it almost seems like a pass the buck from the ministry again, if I can say that. Yeah.
Yes, so through your worship, that is a great point. One thing that was very clear throughout their rollout of this new policy was that if smaller municipalities did lack that technical expertise or resources, that those high-risk environmental concerns would still be managed from the ministry. So if we lack that resource or we lack that expertise, we would then be able to say, we don't have that ability to manage that or deal with that. They would then make a determination whether or not the environmental risk is there for their involvement or not, and that would be kind of how we would be able to alleviate that concern a little bit.
Yeah, totally understand, but the key is they get to make the determination. There could be instances in the future, my point being, where we may have to hire outside expertise if they refuse, and I can see that happening. Anyway, it's interesting. Any further comments? Okay, thank you for that report. So the suggested motion is that report PW 50-25, information update regarding Ontario's environmental compliance policy be received for information. Someone going to move that motion? Councillor Edney moves, seconded Councillor Pridham. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item 8.6, with regards to amending agreement for source water protection services. Mr. Blake, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is a simple amending agreement for source water protection services. As council may recall, every 2 years, a report comes very similar to this. We utilize the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority Risk Management Services program to deliver our Clean Water Act requirements for risk management officers and risk management inspectors. This would be the 2-year renewal through 2026 and 2027. It actually does represent a cost reduction for us over what we have been incurring in recent years, and that is because they're anticipating bringing on another municipality within the region where they are able to distribute costs across the partner municipalities.
Okay, thank you. Questions? We've had this before us in our time. Any further questions with regards to this? Okay, so then the suggested motion is that report PW 51-2025, amending agreement for source water protection service to be received, and the council approves the amending agreement for continued source water protection services with the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority through December 31st, 2027. So I'm going to move that motion. Moved by Councillor Lucas, second by Councillor Alward. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you for that report. Moving on to the Bell Mobility Lease Agreement. Mr. Blake, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is basically Bell's looking to exercise their third amending agreement option for the lease of the water tower on Victoria Street. We've had a long-standing lease agreement with them for mobility services in the community, and a number of years ago went through the process of moving their antennas off the top of the tower tank down onto the concrete column to support their 5G antennas. They're looking to basically exercise their next renewal term, which is a 5-year renewal term, to help with their capital planning, and also looking to add 2 additional renewal terms at 5 years apiece onto the amending agreement as well, to give them some long-term outlook within the community.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Okay, pretty straightforward. So the suggested motion is that report PW 52-2025 Bell Mobility Lease Agreement be received, and that council approves the Bell Mobility Inc. Lease Agreement amending agreement. Someone going to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Pridham, second by Councillor Edney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 8.8, with regards to our water leak forgiveness policy. Mr. Blake, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is a report back to council from a previous discussion we had at SPC earlier this year, where we discussed general policy framework for a water leak forgiveness program that would provide some level of financial consideration or compensation to residents when they experience that unforeseen or unanticipated large water bill that can come from a water leak. We looked at that time at SPC, we looked at a bunch of program eligibility requirements, program ineligibility requirements, and kind of some thresholds for minimum bills, maximum bills, so on and so forth, and how all that could formulate into a policy that would work for St. Mary's. What we've done is we've taken that feedback away. Since that time, we've researched other similar programs that other municipalities offer to their residents, and then drafted the policy that's presented tonight for consideration that looks to incorporate all those discussions from SPC, as well as some best practices that we saw elsewhere that are in programs in place currently.
Okay, thank you. Questions? I think this checks the box. I guess the only question I had is why we went to just setting reserve amount as opposed to an amount per bill or something like that. Was this sort of the more common faction? Because I guess the concern's always raised, well, it's not a large amount. The question is, do you have enough in reserve? I mean, that's a fair question, you know?
Yeah, so just to clarify, what we've done or what we've proposed is that the program would operate basically as a budget line item from the water system accounts. So every year, we generate a reserve contribution that goes into the reserve for the water system. This would show up as a budget line item under the operations and maintenance budget that would be utilized as requests come in throughout the year. So basically, if it went over budget or under budget, it just impacts the transfer to reserve at the end of the year. So instead of having a standalone reserve account for water leak that is collected specific for that, it just operates out of the general reserve for the water system.
Okay. Councilor Pridham?
Thank you, through your worship. Just a question about notification. If there's a water bill that's really high, the town is going to make their best efforts to identify and notify the account holder. How does that go about? Does Festival Hydro tell you about that, or who actually is going to be responsible for contacting them?
Through your worship to Councillor Pridham. So right now, it would be utilizing the same process that we currently have in place. So right now, Festival Hydro takes a proactive approach to kind of meet that best effort threshold to notify people. Their approach will vary depending on what kind of contact information they have on the account. If they have a phone number, an email, they can reach out and contact people by those means. If they don't have those informations on the account, then it's paper mail, which with disruptions lately can be problematic. But basically, their system will generate flags on accounts that are suspect of high usage or abnormal based on previous history for the account. So when their system throws those flags, then they take that proactive approach to kind of attempt to notify the resident, and that's that best effort proactive approach.
When it says the town and bill collectors, so it's really Festival Hydro that's doing that piece, not necessarily our staff.
Correct. So it would be Festival Hydro, but then with the town or the bill contractor, then if they need us to reach out for some other reason, then it's in there that we can reach out and try that best effort approach as well.
Yeah, that's, I guess my concern was if they couldn't reach, would there be a call back to the town and say, we've been trying to get a hold of these people, could you stop by or something, just so that something's doesn't get way out of hand.
Yeah, so just to add to that, what they'll do right now is if something's like really anomalous, they'll reach out and say, can you go and verify the read for this property? Something doesn't seem right. And we have a reader gun with us that we can go out and quickly get that read and say, no, something happened with the route, and that's not the actual read we got. We have this value, and we'll do that way as a check and balance, or we can go and drop a notice off at the door as a means to do that as well. And we've done that historically.
I can verify it works. We had someone in my house trying to grow grass this summer, and I got 2 calls actually. But anyway, they kept forgetting to turn the water off. Anyway, Councillor.
No, I was actually going to follow up with the same thing. I had a lot of plants to water this summer, and I knew I had gotten an alert. Now, it's good we moved that out to 90 days, though, because I started heavy watering in July. August, my notification came September 16th. So we're 75 days before I would have known that there's a problem, and like I say, it started in July. So I think I'm glad we pushed that window out, because that's when the notification came to me.
Okay, anything further? All right, good. So the suggested motion is the report PW 55-2025 water leak forgiveness policy be received, and the council approves the water leak forgiveness policy to address adjustments to water bills resulting from severe or unexpected water usage caused by leaks, and that council consider bylaw 55-2025 being a bylaw to authorize the water leak forgiveness program. So I'm going to move that motion. Moved by Councillor Pridham, second by Councillor Edney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 8.9, with regards to consideration for leak forgiveness. This is in regards to a letter that we received. Mr. Blake, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So this is, the report's presented because when we received the request, we didn't have a policy framework in place to navigate and manage it. Based on the previous report, moving forward, these types of requests wouldn't come forward anymore because they would be dealt with through the policy. Now that being said, it offered a perfect example so that council could see how the policy would be implemented, how it applies to individual leaks and so on and so forth. So with this one in particularly, it ticked all the boxes for what we had received for the feedback on the policy. The house was being monitored. It did not go to the sanitary sewer system. And just all those program eligibility requirements were met. There was no red flags for program ineligibility. And then the recommended value there for reduction would be 50% of the value of the excess amount that was incurred because of the leak. And in this particular case, we did receive the supporting information that substantiated that the leak was found, repaired promptly, and the bill, the next bill in the cycle verified that water usage had returned to normal. So based on that, I'll take any questions, but that's kind of how the policy would work. And if
Okay, thank you. Questions with regards to this request? Okay. All right, so I'll put the motion on the floor then. The report PW 53-2025, consideration for water leak forgiveness be received, and the council approve the water leak forgiveness request for 100 Church Street North in the amount of $594.09, and the council directs staff to coordinate with Festival Hydro to apply the necessary credit to the water account. So I'm willing to move that. Councillor Edney moves, seconder. Councillor Alward. Any discussion? Seeing none, call to question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to councillor reports. Councillor Luna couldn't be here this evening, but she asked our CEO to convey some information with regards to health unit. Brent, do you mind speaking to that, please?
Yeah, so thank you, Your Worship. So in Councillor Luna's absence, she wanted me to relay that the health unit has recently passed their budget at a very modest increase, and our budget impact for 2026 will be $1,400. So I would just like to acknowledge that's a very responsible increase by the health unit, and of all of our external agencies that request money, I would say that it's to be the least impactful in terms of a percentage increase. I think when council sees their budget binder, you'll note that our external service providers and our police make up a significant impact to our increase this year, but we will keep the health unit off of that list. The other update she wanted me just to provide with council is just a reminder to register for Municipal Day on November 19th. So if you would like to register, just contact Jenna and she'll have you registered.
Okay, thank you for that. So we'll, Councillor Craigmile is absent this evening as well, so I'll start with Councillor Edney, if you would, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't able to attend this month's mobility meeting, so I met with Amber and was able to pick up a few of the highlights. So I'll just let you know what those were. Right now, they're in the process of interviewing a driver. 5 applicants were reviewed. Interviews began on September 26th. Amber has made the grant application to Rural Ontario Development Program. That was on September 24th. And she has scheduled herself to meet with MPP Matthew Ray and MP John Nader, and discussions to take place around funding, support, and service limitations. The Nourish Market pilot to begin October 16th. This is funded by the St. Mary's Hospital Foundation. They'll be offering a 6-month trial, which allows all access and free transportation to residents of St. Mary's to get to the Nourish Market. Agreements with Sci-Hata Care, which is our new IT platform that replaces the discontinued SIMS program. We will start planning for the system migration in the upcoming weeks. And currently reviewing the MOU with Easy Ride, which has been quite just getting together with them has been a challenge. Going to get over to the Baseball Hall of Fame. No one wants to say the word baseball right now, but we did a week ago. Here we are. So the membership drive has begun for the coming year. The Expo's Netflix documentary comes out on October 21st. The Heritage Auctions appraisal event is November 4th and 5th. Museum is open for pre-booked tours. now. And the Canadian Baseball History Conference is here in town November 1st and 2nd. There are 3 newly appointed members to our board, 2 of which, Han Sing Lung and Michael Lunder, both work for the Blue Jays. And Gregor Chisholm is a writer for the Toronto Star. And so that is what we have there. Police services, there wasn't much to report. We more or less kind of went through the statistics. There was a couple of interesting things brought up later that day in Stratford at the police services there. There's been a 5-year trend increase in retail theft. And 5 years kind of marks our COVID issues. So mental health calls continue to be very high, especially in Stratford. 3 new taxi licenses were granted, and the police chief has brought in a facility dog. This is different than a sniffer dog. We actually got to meet the dog, and this is a dog that, in the most simple terms possible, provides comfort and allows both victims and the police themselves to kind of relax. It was interesting how it was presented. It would be really, I think, at the next police services board, I'm going to ask the chief if he wouldn't mind explaining it to our local board here, because it was super interesting to hear all that. And just lastly, where was it here? September 12th, we had our cement plant meeting. And basically, we examined the complaint process to see, if it's working the way we hope it would. Complaints are down considerably over the last couple of years, and and I think that's all I have to report.
Okay,
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Councillor Lucas, please.
Thank you, through the mayor. A few things. We had a PAC meeting earlier, or in September. We dealt with that tonight's meeting. It was regarding the property on Park Lane, the severance on Park Lane and Thomas. Thank you. So that was our PAC meeting. Spruce Lodge, we had a meeting. We're actually sitting financially. We're sitting good. We're running a small surplus, which was awesome. We had a recent audit by the ministry, and they clawed back a significant amount of funding from previous years, COVID years, because we hadn't reached our occupancy targets. So there was a clawback there, but there was some back and forth which reduced some of the pain for sure. And there's still continue to be very well staffed, so that's awesome news for Spruce Lodge. Chamber of Commerce, I did officially pass the torch on, or unofficially maybe, pass the torch on to Councillor Pridham, but I announced that at the Chamber meeting. But just a highlight is the Excellence Awards coming up. They've changed the venue this year, and they're going to do more of a Appy's kind of as opposed to a sit-down meal, and it's going to be held at Tom Patterson Theatre. So they've increased their attendance, or the ability for attendance numbers, and kind of reduce the cost. So I think that's going to be a win-win for that event. And lastly, I had Heritage Committee as well. It was just a couple of sign permits for local businesses, so it's good to see that businesses are still spending money and being created. So I think that's good news for the community.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Councillor Pridham?
Thank you, through your worship. Library board met, and the board directed the support of a fundraising plan, and hoping to move forward on that. We'll see how that goes. It calls for some engagement with the community, and we'll see how that goes. And adult learning is in need of new computers because the computers they have don't match. I guess there's a Windows upgrade that makes them now not usable. So there's an $11,000 purchase. They're applying for a grant in hopes that that will cover the purchase of the 8 computers. And if not, there is money in the reserve fund, so they can go ahead and purchase anyway. The board supported that. And the Rec and Leisure Committee, just a reminder that the Sports Wall of Fame induction ceremony is on November 1st, and it's at 2 o'clock at the PRC, the arena side there in the hallway. So I believe that would cover it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions? Okay. Councillor Alward?
Thanks, Your Worship. So the BIA met October 6, 2025. We did select a new treasurer, and Dan Troyer, our previous treasurer, decided to enjoy her retirement in full from the BIA, and I respect her and wish her the best for it. We set aside $500 for the Peacemakers Quilt Show, which is the local Peacemakers Quilt Show, to represent themselves at Quilt Canada, which is the larger national quilting show organization of some sort, so that they could then try and boost tourism and draw to town when they have the Peacemakers Quilt Show, which already does very, very well. With regards to marketing, we set aside $500 from the marketing budget for meta ads, so different Facebook ads for the BIA, which is excellent. We're to see some report back, and it's an ongoing discussion about the Christmas lights downtown this year. We set aside a budget of $250 for postcards, which highlight the various events we're going to do regarding extended hours for the BIA. So there will be some nights upcoming where we will be staying open late, so as to draw more folks downtown in the evening. We received correspondence from the National Disability Employment Awareness organization with regards to Light It Up, as we did here this evening. So businesses are being encouraged to do the blue and purple color scheme to celebrate contributions and strengthen our workplaces through inclusion for disabled individuals. Next, we set aside $15,000 for self-watering pots for this upcoming year. We set aside $3,000, and this is a 50-50 split with the town on new banners. So there will be another set of banners in the rotation. I guess they're going to engage the same artists who have done the electrical boxes downtown, which are seemingly relatively popular. So we're going to keep sort of that artistic, stylistic theme. I delivered my council report on the matter I discussed earlier with the ICNI properties and the reduction in funding. So that discussion was had, and there is, as I said, some concern there with downloading. And then we had at the very end, we had the HGTV discussion. So one of the members engaged with me and myself and staff on the week before this meeting took place. And so the email that we all got regarding the HGTV and the staff decision had been passed on to many of the members upon their request. There were some concerns shared by the members that they felt that the town decision had essentially made the choice for all community members with regards to submitting an application, and that in essence, the town's decision to not submit an application kind of negates the purpose of anybody in the community or BIA putting in an application. And part of this concern is that they felt that it would be very beneficial to the BIA to have such an event and the potential economic spin-off. There was a lot of belief that actually there are very positive optics that can be presented from these shows, as well as the following economic impact can also be significant. So between staff and I, we advised that the BIA is still welcome to put an application forward, and that just because the town is elected not to put an application forward doesn't necessarily mean we've said we have no interest in supporting community members who are willing to put one forward. And then following that, should they so desire, they can then submit a letter to council, and we can review the application as well as potentially the staff decision. So other than that, I have nothing else to report.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. So the suggested motion is that committee and board minutes listed under agenda items 9.1 to 9.18 be received, and that the verbal updates provided by council representatives on those committees and board meetings be received. So I'm going to that motion. Moved by Councillor Pridham, seconded by Councillor Alward. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Under item 10, I have nothing under emergent business. I have nothing under notice of motions, which leads us to item 12, which is bylaws. So the suggested motions is that bylaws 53-2025, 54-2025, and 55-2025, and Z 161-2025 be approved by council. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Edney, seconded by Councillor Lucas. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, which leads us to closed sessions. We'll maybe adjourn for 5 minutes before we head into closed. Okay? Okay, we'll reconvene. So I'm going to seek a motion that council move into a session that is closed to the public at 7:55 PM as authorized under the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, Section 239 2D, Labor Relations or Employee Negotiations. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Alward, seconded. Councillor Pridham.